नमस्कार आणि योकार तुमका प्रुडंट मिडियाच्या ह्या खाशेल्या कार्यावळीत आज आमच्या बरोबर असा नामनेच्यो लेखिका हिंदीतल्यो बेस्ट सेलर लेखिका अलका सरावगी. अलका सरावगी हे नाव सगळ्यांक प्रचलित आसतलेंच. तांचे कालिकथा वाया बायपास ह्या कादंबरी संग्रह ह्या कादंबरीक साहित्य अकादमीचो पुरस्कार लाभलोच. पूण त्यो जेन्ना हो पुरस्कार तांकां लाभलो त्यो हिंदींतल्यो सगळ्यात युवा लेखिका आशिल्ल्यो. तशेंच कालिकथा वाया बायपास हे गोंयकारां खातीर म्हत्वाचें कारण कालिकथा वाया बायपास हाज्या कोंकणी अणकाराकूय साहित्य अकादमीचो पुरस्कार लाभला. आज ते आमच्या स्टुडियोत प्रुडंट मिडियाच्या स्टुडियोत आयल्या. अलकाजी, वेलकम टू the studio of Prudent Media. So, Alkaji, when you last came to Goa, so your novel was released about Sarla Devi Chaudrani and Mahatma Gandhi. So this time, so you had come for a D.D. Kosambi Festival of Ideas. So in terms of literature, your literary works, what makes Alka Saraogi to Goa this time?
I think it's a wonderful place for a Hindi writer to be, because what I have seen, that all the teachers and all the students, they are very serious about, very sincere about, learning about Hindi and the books that they read. So they ask very good questions, very deep questions. So there's a very good atmosphere. This is what I have seen. I mean, which I think is, if you compare to North India, I mean, people are more involved in literature here. This is what I feel. So it's always a pleasure to come. Last time I was here for the IBM show. And this time, of course, D.D. Kosambi's Festival of Ideas, it's very prestigious. And to be included in the legacy of speakers, it was an honor. And I really enjoyed the conversations that we had yesterday.
So, I mean, whenever we meet a writer, okay, so as a student, okay, we always try to ask them, what are you reading these days? So, kya pad rahi hai aap aajkal?
Actually, what happens with me is once I start writing a book, then reading always takes a back seat. And once I finish a novel, then, I splurge with reading, because then there are so many books to be read and so many books that people have sent to me and I have bought from the book fairs and all. So this last book that I read was Matlab Hindu. That's a novel by the debut novel of a writer in Indore called Ambar Pandey. And it has a combination of history, because it starts, when Gandhi was working as a barrister, in which he failed and went to South Africa later on. But this is the period when Gandhi, the formative period of Gandhi. And there is one character, some Govardhan Das Dave, a young boy, a teenager rather, or a young man, and he looks into Gandhi's life from a distance. He wants to follow Gandhi and he follows him around in the city of Bombay. So I found it very, very interesting. And basically, I think, a book that enriches you in so many ways, because the language that he uses is, a kind of old kind of Hindi, and a Hindi which is sprinkled with Gujarati, the kind of Hindi that Gandhi spoke. So he has a knack of, really enlivening that image, of the city, of the roads, of these characters. So I enjoyed it very much.
Okay. So, Abhi, I mean, when we are speaking about Gandhi, okay, so your recent novel about Sarla Devi Chaudrani or Mahatma Gandhi, which is widely discussed today, and it also discusses the relationship that both of them had, which is validated in the history. Okay, they themselves confessed it. So, how difficult it was to portray this in a novel? So,
actually, we have around 85 letters of Gandhi to Sarla Devi Chaudrani. And I must put the thing in context, because Gandhi came to Punjab. Sarla Devi Chaudrani was the niece of Rabindranath Tagore. She was a Bengali woman. But she was married in Lahore to this Punjabi lawyer and an editor of newspapers, Pandit Rambas Dutt Chaudhary. So after 6 months after Jallianwala Bagh, that is 1919, Gandhi was allowed to go to Punjab by the British authorities, and he stayed at Sarla Devi's home. At that time, Pandit Rambas Dutt Chaudhary was in jail after the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. And Gandhi saw in her, the possibility of being an intellectual and a political partner, especially because Sarla Devi was a person, I mean, she had uh, made a all pan in Indian Women Association called Bharat Sri Mahamandal in 1910, and which had branches all over India. And she was working tirelessly for women's emancipation, women's education, especially. And so Gandhi saw this her to be, a kind of intellectual partner in her. But and Gandhi fell in love with her. I mean, that was, purely, something which is not planned, as all of us know. But it all comes in the letters, which he wrote to Sarla Devi, these 85 letters that we have. And Geraldine Forbes, who was a historian, a professor of history at New York College, so she had been collecting these letters from the last 40 years. So during the lockdown, she came out with this book, which is called Lost Letters, a feminist approach to Indian nationalism. And she has just put these letters there with an introduction. So, and when I was attending this Zoom seminar during lockdown, she said that Sarla Devi Chaudhrani was a character on only a novelist can do justice to her, because we don't have Sarla Devi's letters, mind you, because those were burnt by Gandhi's daughter-in-law, Lakshmi Gandhi, and we have just 4 or 5 surviving letters. So I think it was difficult in a way to conceptualize a novel, because you don't want, I mean, as a serious writer, I don't want to write a book, which is written with an agenda, say to kind of uh, lash Gandhi, and and but the my foremost intention was what Geraldine had pointed it out to me, that we must, I mean, celebrate Sarla Devi, as one of the foremost runners of feminism in India, and she has been a forgotten chapter of history. And living in Bengal, you see, I feel especially, I mean, a kind of an intimacy with Sarla Devi Chaudhrani, and the kind of struggles and that she went through. And I think this love story, because it has 12 chapters, the love survived just 12 months. So, and Gandhi used to call her his spiritual wife. But then there were objections from the periphery, maybe from Gandhi's family too. So it was, a kind of, the relationship which had the context of the political struggle, and this agenda of achieving political freedom for India. So this love is also a kind of a kind of a what you say, an ethical love. It was love. It was pure love. Gandhi admits it, that it was the first love of his life, and he was 50, and he had taken brahmacharya 13 years back at the age of 37, and Sarla Devi was 47. So it was none of, I mean, the kind. But you see, I mean, this love is always sprinkled with ideas about how to make it, viable for the nation, to give more energy to the movement. So you see, this kind of relationship is, I think, is something very important, and to bring Sarla Devi's in the foremost, for what she did for the nation. I think these were mainly, my, targets.
So you bring a very important perspective in this entire discourse of nation building, partition, and this entire discourse is the role of a woman. Is that when we see the history, when we read the history, it is always about the men arguing for and against. Okay, whether it is a making of the new nations. So, and the one metaphor that is often used to describe this partition is the rupture. So we always find women at the core of a conflict, but women was never a part of a core when it came to a decision making. So being from a diasporic community, and that is a very important that's the different thing that you open up in the literary discourse, that basically you open up two different things. One is the milieu of entire Marwari community, and a kind of a new storytelling in the Hindi literature, which is not linear narrative. So, how you look at this conflict as a woman and also as a women writer?
When Sarla, talking about again about Sarla Devi, in 1935, she said that when Congress talks about protesting at sites, doing dharnas, going to jail, so they bring women in the forefront. But when it comes to making laws, getting elected to the seats in the assembly, then there are no women. I mean, so why is it so? You want women in the forefront at some points, but when it comes to decision making, they take a backseat. No, but there are no women representation. So I think that what happened during partition also, you see. Firstly, I have written this book, Kulbhushan ka naam Darj Kijiye, which is about Bengal partition. Now, Bengal partition is also a much, forgotten chapter in the
Yes,
stories on
because when we
partition.
talk about partition, we talk about partition of Punjab.
Punjab all the time. So, firstly, to bring about Bengal's partition, and Bengal partition was very different in the because there was just not one incident that led to the rupture, as we put it, but it was, there were waves of partition because both were Bengals, and people did not want to leave their homes. But whenever there was communal violence, there people there was a fresh flux of migration, and they were not looked at very sympathetically by the central government. In fact, Patel said, that Bengalis only know how to cry, and why don't they go back and claim their homes? So you see, the situation of women is becomes more precarious because they are the ones who are raped during communal violence, and there is an instance of a young girl who was going to be engaged, being raped and becoming a mental wreck after that, and how it affects the whole family. But you see, the fight always is, fought by the men, so to say, because they are the bread earners. And so women are always in a patriarchal society. The women are always kind of there in the background. So it is always the story of men because you see, Kulbhushan is a man, and he is a marginalized man in many ways. He's very ugly to look at, and then he comes as a refugee to India in 1964, and his brothers also shun him. They call him a thief, a vagabond. He works as a bus conductor, and finally he doesn't want to do anything with his identity. He takes on a Bengali name, marries a Bengali woman. So you see, he wants to chuck off his diasporic nomenclature, I mean, his caste, his name, his community. He wants to, get rid of all this, and he becomes a Bengali because he thinks, being belonging to a diaspora is, another burden for him. And you see, the mother, the only woman, in the diasporic community that comes across is his mother, who suffers a lot because her husband is in East Pakistan, that is from 64. He comes in 71 when Bangladesh happens. And his son is, treated in this way by the family, by the rest of her sons. So she is, in a continuous state of suffering, but she has no say in the matter. She cannot help her own son, who's being treated like a vagabond, like a refugee. So the son, Kulbhushan, runs away to Dandakaranya. So you see, the women, in the picture, they hardly come in the picture. They are always at home, always, crying, or and if they are, during migration, if they are not raped or not harmed in any ways. So you see, it's the struggle is more for the women to somehow cook and feed the family, but it never takes. Even in my story, there are no women, so to say, who really feel the brunt of the partition. It is the men.
So, that's fascinating. Another thing for our viewers, okay, is that when you talk about this displacement, Goa is also, Konkani is also a diasporic community is because of a various reasons, colonialism, inquisition, for various processes. And it also generates a generational trauma. And it also create some sort of a collective conscience, and literature plays a very important role there. So displacements have taken place all across the world, okay, whether it's in Africa, Latin America, and so is India and an Indian subcontinent. But wherever we saw the displacement, there were a conscious efforts to make a reconciliation process. It was a political process that both the communities come together and try to, because Africa is an example of that. So we have gone through such a trauma, but there was no need for a reconciliation mission, and literature filled up that gap. So if we, I mean, if as a writer of a diaspora, the writer who has dealt with this complex theme, okay, and if I ask you, what is our expression of this reconciliation? What is the positive side of it?
Actually, in Kalikatha via bypass, especially, I have this diasporic element in other novels as well. But especially in Kalikatha via bypass, since, it goes across several generations, of Marwadis in Calcutta. So you see, the struggles are the most for the people who came first. I mean, probably during before the First World War. So they had, some people had come and they earned some money, and the message went and more people came. If you read Thomas Tinberg's novel, his work of non-fiction, Marwadis from traders to industrialists. So you see there's a beeline on the map of India. There's, like a beeline of people migrating to several zones. So probably the ones who came the first, really felt the brunt of being displaced, because here was another culture which was Bengali and which was very superior. You see, Sarla Devi Chaudhrani went to Mysore defying her family, the Jodasako Tagore family, who were like like a princely family. And she defied them to go to Mysore to teach in a school in 1895. So you see, the Bengalis were much advanced, and she was singing at the Congress session in 1901 when Gandhi saw her for the first time. So, but the Marwadi women, they were, doing ghungat till here, and they didn't know, I mean, how they were eating, inside the ghungat, and they had no exposure to outside life. So I think, when the women came and they were kind of, and shut down in their homes, and the men, firstly, the women came, I think, during the second generation. The first generation, women never came. They earned money, they sent it there. They came after 2-3 years, or maybe after 10 years, or if they died, they never came. So I think for the first generation, it was very, very difficult. But actually, the brunt of being displaced, started from the second generation. Because the second generation felt ashamed of, their backwardness, and they were made fun of by the Bengalis. They were given names like Medo and Koto, which, they are derogatory terms. And so they wanted their women, to to throw off this ghungat and the odhni we call it. So even a visit to the doctor, they had to put this heavy odhni, And so it was a business community. The foremost intention was to build, houses, maybe havelis, in Rajasthan. So I think, that with Kishore Babu, my protagonist, who was born in 1925, so you have, Kishore Babu, really being, trying to change things. He does not want his wife, to put sindoor or to put, wear a payal or, things like that, or wear a orni. So he wants, want his wife to be modern. But you see, his wife is almost illiterate. But then there was, a renaissance kind of a thing, when there were people who were associated with Gandhi. And I think Gandhi's coming to India was a major benchmark, landmark, because after that things started changing. So there was schools in Calcutta for Marwadi girls. In fact, I also went to one of those schools built in those days. And so you had, the generations after that, coming more to terms with, being displaced. And I think that because they earned money, they were the target of, some jealousy also.
It was crime to be rich or
Yes,
to hold money.
Yes. And the Bengalis, with their superiority complex, always looked down upon them. I'll tell you a very funny incident. There was this young man from Berkeley who was doing a research on me. So he was staying with renting out, with a Bengali household. And so he asked the landlord that, do you know Alka Saraogi? So he said, who is she? No, she is a writer. Oh, Marwadis also write? They just write Hundis. And this is, I'm fifth generation. So you see, even now, they kind of, they don't want to accept, that Marwari is also right. In fact, Meenakshi Mukherjee, who herself got a Sahitya Academy, she was a very well-known critic in Delhi, and she wrote a criticism on Kalikatha via bypass. And the foremost magazine called Desh, they refused to publish it. They said, we don't publish, reviews of Hindi books, because Hindi literature is, does not exist for them. So you see, there is this,
Let's talk about the influences on your works. I mean, yesterday, while your introduction, I came to know that you researched on Raghuveer Sahai. So Raghuveer Sahai was a prolific writer and a part of a progressive movement. So, as a student and as a researcher, so what were your influences on your works?
I think Raghuveer Sahai influenced me a lot, because the way he looked at the socio-political reality of free India, and how it was a land of failed promises. I think that, really worked on my, conscience and my way, my worldview of looking at, the kind of independence we had. And I think that when Kishore Babu, at the 50th anniversary of India's independence, he starts walking the roads like a tramp and refuses to sit in a car because the money, a Suzuki, Maruti Suzuki car, the money is sent to Japan. So, and he has all kinds of, revisions of what the kind of life that he led for the last 50 years, and he wants to go back to his idealism. I think all this story, we can never, really decipher how stories are forged in your minds. But I think somewhere, this it all came as an influence from what I was looking through Raghuveer Sahai's eyes, and also Ashok Seksaria, who was my literature guru. He was a friend of Raghuveer Sahai, and he only had asked me to do my PhD on Raghuveer Sahai. So his house was, like a railway platform. He had not married, he had no family, and so people of all kinds, used to come to his house for all kind of things. To vent their problems. Ordinary people, even fourth class staff of the school where I studied, and there were, always energies of, the alternative movements of democracy. So lots of people like from North Bengal, and Kishan Patnaik and Sachidanand Sinha, which were,
Which we call new social
new,
movements.
yeah, new social movements. Following Ram Manohar Lohia, basically. So these were, so I had this, a window to the world of, so many things happening. And was this independence really, an independence for India? So these were the questions which I think which were forged looking at the, meeting the people, listening to them. And I think that, really uh, came out as a story, and
So, as we reach to the last leg of this interview, you are based in Kolkata. Your themes deal with the community that is in the margins, also in Kolkata. You write in Hindi, but you are based in Kolkata because Kolkata is not, known. Not an hub of an Hindi literature.
yes,
It's
but
been
50% of population in Calcutta is Hindi speaking now.
so. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
from Bengal, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. There are no more migrations from Rajasthan, surely. In fact, people are migrating out to other hubs like Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, Hyderabad. But there are so many people from Bihar, from the hinterland of Bengal. No? So,
yes. So.
yes, but it is not the main hub for Hindi
Yeah,
literature.
true.
No,
It's not an epicenter of
no,
it.
it is not.
Also for the literary criticism and
No, it
appreciation
is
of it.
not.
So coming to the last point is that you have been coming to Goa. You are interacting with Goan writers, students. So what is your message to the young writers who write in Konkani, in Marathi? Okay. So what is your message?
I think, that every writer has a unique standpoint, a vintage point for looking at the world. And I think that one has to, really not be influenced by what you have read, and not be influenced by what people tell you how a novel should be written. Because you see, when I wrote Kalikatha, so there was a reading, and there were people from the university, Calcutta University, and they told me, what kind of a book is this? because it was such an haphazard way of writing. I had hundreds and hundreds of stories coming to me about the
You
city.
disrupted the linear narrative.
Yes, the linear narratives. And it was very difficult, to forge a story out of it. So, I mean, there were stories about the Indian independence movement. There were stories about the city of Calcutta, the lanes of Calcutta. There were stories about the migration, obviously. So, how to, navigate my way through those stories and build a story. So when people read it, so they were not impressed. In fact, I was suggested to keep it because it was too much passionate work of passion. And in fact, there was one professor from Gorakhpur who had come as a visiting professor, and handed him over the manuscript. So he said, "It is agar ye angad hai." Angad is matlab not well formed. But even then, just don't touch it and just send it to the publisher. And so you see, I mean, a young reader, a young writer, needs to understand that you have a unique vantage point, you have a unique way of telling the stories. So just be confident and go about it.
Yes. So thank you very much for coming, for making a time to come here and
It
speak
was a
to us.
pleasure.
So it was absolutely pleasure to us. Okay, and thank you very much
Thank you.
for watching this program.
मॅडम सुगंध तर इतलो बरो येता जाणा.
थँक्यू.
टिफिना वांगडा त्यो न्यूट्रिशनाच्यो गुडयो दिवपाक विसरू नाका हा.
आता तो न्यूट्रिशनाच्यो गुळयो विसर.
कित्याक?
का या तांदळातूच सगळे न्यूट्रिशन मेळटले. पंचामृता फोर्टिफाईड राईस हातूंत आयर्न, झिंक, फॉलिक ऍसिड, व्हिटॅमिन ए, बी सारकेले 9 मिनरल्स आसात. तर हे झाले नाही निरोगी आणि सुवादीक. तर पुराय पौष्टिक आहारा खातीर
पंचामृता फोर्टिफाईड राईस
असल्यास पुरो.
पुराय पोषणा खातीर पंचामृता फोर्टिफाईड राईस. घराघरांनी पंचामृता.